Good day, everyone. Today I will be discussing about the multicultural education. So, what is multicultural education? Multicultural education is an idea, an approach to school reform, and a movement for equity, social justice, and democracy. So, in order for us to fully comprehend how does multicultural education come to exist, let us first have a glimpse of the history of multicultural education. So, the historical roots of multicultural education lie in the civil rights movement of the 1960s and 1970s. It comes from the various historically oppressed groups. Many trace the history of multicultural education back to the social actions of African Americans and other people of color who challenged discriminatory practices in public institutions during the civil rights movement. So, among those institutions specifically targeted were educational institutions, which were among the most oppressive and hostile to the ideals of racial equality. So, we have the activist community leaders and parents. They called for curricular reform and insisted on a re examination of hiring practices. Both they demanded should be more consistent with the racial diversity in the country. So in the late 1960s and early 1970s, women's rights movement joined this push for education reform. Women's rights groups challenged inequalities in employment and educational opportunities, as well as income, identifying education as a primary contributing factor in institutionalized and systematic sexism. So there is an emergence of a body of scholarship on multicultural education by progressive education activists and researchers who refuse to allow schools to address their concerns by just simply adding programs and special units on famous women or famous people of color. And one of that is James Banks, one of the pioneers of multicultural education. He was among the first multicultural education scholars to examine schools as social systems from a multicultural context. He grounded his conceptualization of multicultural education in the idea of educational equality. So, according to Banks, in order to maintain a multicultural school environment, all aspects of the school had to be examined and transformed. It includes the policies, the teacher's attitudes, instructional materials, assessment methods, counseling, and the teaching styles. So, as the 1980s flowed in the final decade of the 20th century, multicultural education scholars refocused the struggle on developing new approaches and models of education and learning was built on foundation of social justice, critical thinking, and equal opportunity. So, one of the major goal of multicultural education is to restructure schools so that all students acquire the knowledge, attitudes, and skills needed to function in an ethnically and racially diverse nation and world. Next is multicultural education. They tried to provide student educational experiences that enable them to maintain commitments to their community cultures as well as acquire the knowledge, skills in cultural capital needed to function in the national, civic, culture, and community because they regard skills in democratic living and the ability to function effectively within and across diverse groups as essential goals of schooling. Now let's proceed to the approaches to multicultural education. So there are four approaches. We have the contribution approach, additive approach, transformative approach, social action approach. So first, let's discuss the contribution approach. So this is characterized by the addition of ethnic heroes into the curriculum that are selected using criteria similar to those used to select mainstream heroes for inclusion to the curriculum. So this includes the books, activities that celebrate holidays, heroes, and special events from various cultures. ethnic content is limited primarily to special days, weeks, and months related to ethnic events and celebrations. So examples of this are Cinco de Mayo, Martin Luther King's birthday, and Black History Week. Next one, we have the additive approach. This approach allows teacher to put ethnic content into the curriculum without restructuring it, which takes substantial time, effort, training, and rethinking of the curriculum and its purposes, nature, and goals. It incorporates literature by and about people from diverse cultures into the mainstream curriculum without changing the curriculum itself. Next one, we have the transformative approach. This approach is different from the first two, which is the contribution and additive approach, because this approach changes the structure of the curriculum, while the other two does not restructure the curriculum. So this approach encourages students to view concepts, issues, themes, and problems from several ethnic perspectives and point of view, apart from their own community's point of view or their own ethnic point of view or perspective. So this will allow or will infuse the various perspectives, frames of reference, and content from various groups that will extend students' understandings of the nature, development, and complexity of their own society. Next one is we have the social action approach. Transformation approach plus activities for social change. Students are not mechanically taught to understand and question the social issues arising, but also to make a step into doing what needs to be done. So this will allow students to study this social problem. So for instance, they would ask, what actions should we take to reduce prejudice and discrimination in our school? So that will allow them or enable them to gather data, and once they've gathered data, they are able to analyze the values and beliefs of their own society, and with that they can identify alternative courses of action. What are the options that are possible to be taken? And finally, with that options, they can decide on what actions they will take. So this will teach students thinking and decision-making skills that will empower them and help them acquire a sense of political efficacy. So, as an overall view of multicultural education, it is a process that permeates all aspects of school practices, policies, and organization to ensure the highest levels of academic achievement for all students. It helps students develop a positive self concept by providing knowledge about the histories, cultures, and contributions of diverse groups. So that ends my report. Thank you for listening and have a good day.